the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge, where somebody just won a boatload of money off of JJ Spahn's 65-foot putt. Visit bettoredge.com. Use code SPOTTRACK. Get $20 off and get started today. And if you need a little assistance, visit Spot Track first. Visit your favorite team page. Hit the Bettor Edge banner at the top. And let them pick a couple of top bets for you, including maybe tonight's NBA game, tomorrow's NHL game. Plenty of real estate to get in terms of shelling out some dough and winning some dough coming back. That's bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Sunday, June 15th. We're going to jump on a little early, a little bit of an emergency pod today based on the U.S. Open results. And how about a big blockbuster trade in Major League Baseball? That's next with Dan Soemann. All right, Dan, Rafael Devers on the move. Not crazy surprising based on how things kind of started in terms of free agency and Alex Bregman and all of that, but timing, where the Red Sox live in the standings, how well Devers had been playing, it kind of felt like things had been turned around and patched up a little bit. So I'm gonna pose it this way out of the gate before we break down the details and the nuts and the bolts. The Boston Red Sox trading Rafael Devers was more about getting better immediately, shedding payroll and tax, or getting rid of Rafael Devers.
Interesting way to phrase that. Sorry, I don't mean that in a negative way. In terms of me breaking it down, that's an interesting way to phrase it, because I think B and C have major relevance here, right?
I think it does all of it, right? But to what degree do you think that this trigger got pulled on June 15th?
Yeah, so I think why I hesitated there is I don't want to say this was a money move, because I don't think the Red Sox are in the market of trying to shed payroll. Now, I think they're trying to shed troublesome payroll, which they have seen become Rafael Devers really here in the last few months. So I think it's mostly about that. And when you are, we can walk it all the way back, new GM, et cetera, et cetera. When you have this situation on your hands, this was a deal to me that they probably looked around and said, this is a pretty good package for, albeit a really great franchise player for us, but it's a pretty good package when they're getting out from money that was almost immediately an overpay from the start, right?
Okay, so that's not even, a couple of pushbacks then. If Devers was on a 3 for 45 right now, okay, or even something a little bit more realistic, a 3 for 60 right now, right? Does this trade happen, or is the 8 for 254 remaining such a big part of this that when you combine all of the elements we're talking about here, Boston felt compelled to do it?
Yeah, that's the way to look at it here. Like, in terms of a short-term, long-term move, I don't necessarily think they're throwing in the towel right now. I think mostly this was new GM. Previous GM made commitments. He's going to play third. He's whatever was spoken about, right? They tried to transition that on the fly after bringing Bregman, and it didn't work. Right. I think the writing was on the wall that this was not going to start getting better over the remainder of the contract from this day forward, since Bregman started, however you want to look at it. If Alex Bregman leaves next year, I think things, yeah, right. So I think they just looked at where they were and how things have been playing out ever since he signed the contract and said, this might be the right time to move on, even if he is performing at a, MVP caliber offensive rate right now. I mean, we've talked about this in relation to Vlad Jr. with Devers. As soon as he signed it, people thought he was going to move off third base at some point. They just didn't think it was going to be 2 years into the contract, which then complicates a lot of other things. But that day was going to come at some point. I think some of this is the Red Sox getting out from that down the line trouble of, we have a guy who wants to play the field, who is not a good fielder, probably needs to stay at first or DH and doesn't want to do that. And we have a whole bunch of money committed to him. So when the Giants gave them a very respectable package, I think that they just, I think they had to do it. Right?
I definitely want to talk about the package coming back here because it's important, and it's going to feel underwhelming And I just want, and obviously this audience is on board with it. We have to keep in context that there's $254 million attached to this package, right? I mean, that's, exactly. We talk about this all the time with football moves and all these other trades that we break down, but the Giants are eating every dollar of this, plus $2 million extra for the trade bonus, right? So it's cherry and cherry and cherry on top of the sundae here. So that is a huge part of this conversation. But I think if I'm reading some of the tea leaves correctly coming out of Craig Breslow, right? It's important, Dan. The new front office, a lot of new mouths to feed, right? And not a lot of new eyeballs. Yes, it's Boston. Yes, it's a huge market, but this all broke terribly in February, right? I mean, you've got the superstar on this team that after this new front office went out and I think did a decent job of adding a couple of arms and then Bregman late, which should be a phenomenally positive step forward for this team heading into week one and, where the season was headed. And then Devers comes out and basically poo-poos the entire offseason, right? So without question, sour taste in the mouth of this front office here. And then we get I'm not moving to first. And then, and I think this is the end all be all. Now he refuses to go back to third. Right. Yeah. Right. Now it's, I'm not even playing the field for you anymore. So we should have seen this coming probably a little bit more in clear focus than we did. Cause this was certainly a Father's Day special for sure, but he was never going to play actual baseball for this team anymore without significant changes. So this was inevitable. It's just, at what time and what package and what team, which leads us to the Giants part of this. And I want to talk about the players that are coming back to Boston from San Francisco before we get into Devers' fit in San Francisco. But they're both equally super interesting. This is your neck of the woods. Tell me about Kyle Harrison. I know a little bit about Jordan Hicks and his inconsistencies and his injury history. I know nothing about the outfield prospect except for he's rated high and he can play some first base, which I know is very much important. And then there's a relief pitcher who's been an A-ball, kind of going through the motions and getting his feet wet a little bit. Again, feels underwhelming for a legitimate all MLB player annually speaking, but the Giants are paying that contract and the Boston Red Sox aren't anymore. So tell me about these new Red Sox players, Dan.
Yeah, let's start with Hicks. People listening to this are probably well familiar with him. Former reliever. He's tinkered back and forth or flipped back and forth between starter reliever. The Red Sox, I would assume, are going to utilize him in the rotation with the thought that he can be a late inning option, high end relief type of player. 2 years still, 2 years beyond this year, still left to $12.5 million. So there is some money. This wasn't just a straight salary dump. They took some money in return, but it's at least a valuable major league piece that is established. Kyle Harrison, I think people are. This is the piece people are probably down on most in terms of they're just like why, but we're not really that far removed from Kyle Harrison being. I think he made it up as high as the 30th overall prospect on MLB.com's top 100 list, which puts him as, I think at the time he was one of the top 5 pitching prospects in the game, extremely highly thought of. He's had a solid but not super high end start to his career, but I mean, cost controlled pitching is so hard to come by. I think there's a lot of meat on this bone. Just some things I've read. His pitch profile specifically lines up with what the Red Sox target with their younger prospects a lot. So maybe there's even another. I just laid out that he was at one time an elite pitching prospect who has taken a step back. Maybe there's some meat on the bone, and the Red Sox can kind of get him back to where he was. Really, probably 9-12 months ago, he was a very, very highly thought of pitching prospect. So that's not just a throw-in by any means. So Tibbs is the outfielder. He was a first-round pick last year. He had a bit of a slow start in the minor leagues this year, but he's kind of broken out. Just a really good, solid contact hitter, really high hard hit rates, which in my opinion, offensive players are so hard to project those are tools you're looking for. Power can come, things like that can come if a young player makes good contact and that contact is hard. I'm typically going to buy. He's got a good arm from what I've seen. Probably slots into a corner outfield spot. Also pushes the timeline back maybe a couple of years on him reaching the major leagues, which we've already spoken about, how there's a glut of outfield talent in Boston at the major league level, which could prompt a deal here in the coming weeks. So, and then the Jose Vuto is he sounds like he's going to settle into like a long relief, middle relief type of role, but I haven't read one thing that doesn't think any of these four players are going to be productive Major League Baseball players, and that in and of itself is a very important aspect here. Like, I know, I again, let me also stop right here to say, I think Rafael Devers is a phenomenal offensive player. There is a lot of defensive baggage that comes with him, so I do not blame the Red Sox for saying, we are willing to move on from this critical piece of our organization to build into our next real core window, which is the Roman Anthonys, the Marcelo Meyers, the Christian Campbell. Those players are the core they want to build towards. Rafael Devers was sort of this like remaining piece from the World Series dynasty, lingering years. So, I kind of like them reshuffling and resetting the deck from that perspective too. Just like, even if this is not a real good win now move, I think there is a ton of value in freeing up flexibility in the future from a roster perspective, but a financial perspective too. I want to just round that point out. I started by saying, I want to kind of tread lightly on the financial aspect of it, because this is not we are crying poor, we need to get rid of this major contract. If anything, this is them shipping that out to maybe be big players in the next couple of years, while maybe they see they're going to have to make big financial commitments to some of those prospects I just listed, maybe not. But regardless, like, this is not like the Red Sox saying we're about to go into a 2-3 year rebuild. This is really them resetting the deck ahead of a core couple of years. And
there's a lot of great stuff there. And I don't want to get off too far on tangents, because we got to dive into the Giants side of this. But I think the biggest takeaway, and maybe the one thing that will get overshadowed because of the stardom of Devers, because of the money, that's going to be a big part of this conversation for sure. But the timing of this isn't just that the trade deadline is 6 weeks away and that Boston just swept the Yankees and that Boston is one game over 500 and, fringe window wildcard contenders here. But what's really happened in Boston over the first 10 weeks here is that every prospect that they expected to get to Major League Baseball got to Major League Baseball and has already shown out, has already proven on the smallest of sample sizes that they're at least worth the next 6 years of consideration as a legitimate roster spot for the Boston Red Sox and their position players, right? There's not a single really, big time arm that this organization, at least right now specifically, can hang their hat on as MLB ready, 6 years of team control. Let's go. But there's a 4 to 5 pack of superstar prospects in the field. And Devers was sort of the old guy in the room, right? And the grumpy old guy in the room, which makes it even worse. And not only do you maybe not need him on the field anymore because he's a B- defensive player that's only going to get worse over the course of the next 8.5 years of this contract, but you don't want to do anything to sour these MLB prospect debuts. You know what I mean? To in the fans' perspective, and certainly not in the clubhouse perspective. And if he was really a problem, he was a problem publicly, he had to be a problem internally, right?
Yeah.
And if he was, all the more reason to just split the two devices apart, right? And make the old go away and the new come in and be the fresh spark. And you're right. This isn't going to do much for 2025. And that will be the worst part of this for Red Sox fans who went through Mookie Betts, who are still kind of reeling from the Mookie Betts stuff and really haven't fully recovered. This is going to make them a little bit worse in 2025. There's just no question about it.
No doubt.
But they did turn Devers into a $250 million dump, right? That's a financial dump they don't have to take on anymore. And they've got an arm, at least one arm out of this that they can hang their hat on, who's got 4.5 years of team control left, minimum. They might be able to squeeze an extra year of arb if they played this right. So, and he projects to be a middle of the rotation starter. That's way more than most teams can say with a June trade at any point in time. So is it going to look bad in 10 years? We have no idea. But I think you have a really good handle on seeing this from a positive light. And I'll bring our spin onto it because, again, we don't have to know the answers until September something. But in terms of June 15th, this move got Boston under the tax. They are about $1 million and change under the tax threshold for 2025. And if you're telling me that wasn't in consideration, you're just wrong. That's a huge part of this, because if they're going to be one game over 500 or fringe wild card contenders, but not legitimate World Series contenders, then they shouldn't be taxpayers. Right?
Yep.
For all that we're talking about here. So the next couple of years in the rotation got better. The accounting got better. And the headache of having to deal with whatever, the weekly saga that has become Devers, who refused to play defensive baseball for this team anymore, got way better. So that's 3 wins for Boston. Let's flip the switch to the San Francisco Giants, because it's an ugly transition here in terms of what we're talking about. They need a first baseman. Long term, okay, because I can't believe Wilmer Flores is doing what he's doing, but he's doing it, and he's just going to have to retire at some point in time. They do have Matt Chapman, but he is out for 4 or 5 weeks here with an injury, short term, not long term, and he is signed, fully guaranteed through 2030 per his extension this last offseason. So there's holes, but not necessarily a hole at third base. And we're talking about a player who refused to play first base and refused to jump ship for his old team. What makes us think he's going to walk into San Francisco and become a defensive player for the San Francisco Giants?
Well, that was literally my first thought, is the destination. I like in a vacuum. We've talked at length about how the Giants have struggled to really land that cornerstone anchor offensive piece via free agency in recent years. This was probably them.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I didn't mean to leave that out. This, getting him as just a bat alone, is a massive win. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Huge. Yeah. And so if this was their route they had to take to do that, I'm fine with that. The puzzling parts to me is Matt Chapman is a bona fide Gold Glove third baseman. He's not moving off third base. So in the short term, sure, you have a DH spot, first base spot. One of the top prospects in baseball is first baseman Bryce Eldridge, who's currently in AAA. He's not real long for the minor leagues, in my opinion. I'm not even saying he'll break in this year, but I would bet you see him next year. So, I mean, what are you going to start moving him around now to accommodate Devers? So the whole thing is just a compounded problem to me from the Giants. So now we're hours after this happened. I am very curious to hear the Giants speak on this and what their plan is, because I have no doubt they made this move with a plan in mind, but what that plan is, I'm not totally sure right now.
It's absolutely, we needed the bat, and oh, by the way, we need a third baseman right now, immediately in the interim. But I have a feeling they're just prepared to pay $250 million for him to be a DH, right, for the foreseeable future. And if he's happy doing that, and it appears that he is, because that's exactly what he wanted to be in Boston, all things considered here. If that's the case, I guess more power to him, right? Because there's not a lot of teams that have the ability to do that and, withstand the rest of the financial responsibilities they're going to have. But to your point initially, they've tried to pay Judge $600 million. They've tried to pay Soto $700 million. They tried to pay Ohtani $750 million, and they weren't allowed to do any of that. So paying Devers $250 for 8 years of plate appearances is nothing to them right now, right?
Yeah, and they probably overpaid for Willy Adames, who's not looking great right now. So that is probably like recency bias too. Like, we kept going back to free agency, trying to get it, and it finally happened, and then this was the outcome that we resulted with, right? So I have no problem with them going and getting the player for all the reasons we just laid out. I'm just a little bit puzzled. Is he just a $250 million DH from 2026 on? Mm-hmm. I mean, we said he was 2 years ago when he signed the deal, so I shouldn't be like poo-pooing that idea right now. But man, it just seems like a real aggressive move. But Buster Posey, new GM there, new front office.
It's funny how that's how it worked on both sides here, because you almost needed that, right? From both sides to get something like this actually to the finish line. I'm not sure an established GM is walking through this door and actually picking up the phone for Devers right now, because they've seen this happen before. But it needs to be said, this is an elite hitter. And he remains an elite hitter. I think he's third in the league in RBIs right now. He is capable of carrying the middle of your lineup still. And if that's all he does, and you're happy paying what you're paying for him, it's a successful move for the San Francisco Giants. And your Adames point isn't nothing, because he's not going to be bad forever. He's a talented shortstop, a talented hitter. And if you believe that bringing in Devers to go in front or behind him is going to elevate the 2025 version of Willy Adames, that's icing on the cake here, and makes the $250 for Devers worth even more. Because if you've handcuffed and elevated your slight overpay for Adames at shortstop with Devers, that's gravy, because this team can afford it. And by the way, and I'll give the shout out to Sarah Langs, like always, because she's always first on this stuff. She was immediately on overlaying all of Devers at bats this year in AT&T Stadium in McCovey Cove, and he would have been 30% more productive if he was a Giant the entire year. So he's going to a ballpark where his style of hitting, his power, his gap to gap, ability to hit is going to thrive as long as he can stay healthy and remain active. So again, if he's a hitter alone, it's not our money. And
not
by the
our
way,
money. Yep.
And last point before we move on a little bit here, in acquiring Devers and assuming the proration this year and everything going forward next year, they've got about $19 million of tax space in San Francisco. So by no means do they have to be done before July 31st in this trade deadline.
Oh, absolutely. I expect both teams to be active.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah. So we talked about Boston. They did acquire an arm. I think there's 2 or 3 more arms in that rotation / bullpen that need to be fixed if Boston's going to be an actual wild card contender. They now have this somewhat surplus of young talent, both at the Major League Baseball level and to some degree still in the minor league system. Do you expect now, with some of this newfound tax base, that they get a little bit more aggressive in maybe moving one of these kids to go get some serious arms for the stretch run here?
So I mean, if you're talking about like one of the big 3 prospects, I think that's a hard
no chance.
No chance. I think this is a nice assess. So you spoke on the timing of this trade a little bit earlier. I like that point, because this gives the Red Sox time to assess what that young crew can do over the next couple of weeks. And if they need to add, I'm sure they'll add, but that level of adding could be from Josh Naylor, high-end trade candidate, to like a Ryan or like Ryan O'Hearn or somebody like lesser than that. You know what I mean? So they might feel out exactly what they need here over the next month and then go from there. Regardless, I think this clears the path for the future. Like, I want to be very clear about this. The money saved from the Devers contract will be reallocated over the coming seasons, whether that's tying up these young guys on long-term pre-arbitration extensions, or whether it's going after Murakami, the Japanese guy coming over, likely the Japanese third baseman likely to come over next offseason. Like, they will be players in free agency with that money, which is why I originally was so treading lightly on the financial aspect of this. But in the short term, no doubt, it makes them no doubt weaker offensively now, but they do have pieces there that could pick up some of that slack and get them to a point where they kind of reassess exactly what they need, maybe a month from now. Let's call it that.
More likely, or hasn't really changed much, that Alex Bregman is back in Boston now in 2026 on some sort of extension.
So that's maybe the biggest question to me, that the biggest vulnerability that the Red Sox have opened themselves up to is, what does third base look like beyond this year? Now, man, I'm really projecting a lot here. Matt Chapman re-signed with the Giants after signing a similar Bregman deal. Bregman is also Scott Boras' client.
Same agent. Yep.
I think there is, like, if this all has played out, they've now cleared Devers. I think there's a real legit chance that Bregman opts out and re-signs back in Boston now as a longer term deal. Now, I'm getting way ahead of myself.
Sure.
The main thing here is that they have I've talked at length a number of times on this podcast. General consensus, there's some studies out there showing 3 to 4 core players make you a legit World Series contender. The Red Sox pretty much have their 3 core players for the next half decade, if you will, here now, and they just have to add around the edges of that, whether that's Bregman next year, whether that's a different signing in free agency. I expect them to be rocket shipping up from this, not from this immediate point forward, but 2026, I think, I mean, this really cleared the deck, in my opinion, for them. From there.
It kind of feels like an NFL team that just figured out their rookie quarterback can play football, right? Like they've got a bunch of stud core prospects that are now MLB ready, and at least are showing signs that they're going to be around for the next, however many years, which will unlock their ability. And now this, $27 million in change per year that they just shed for the next 8 seasons gives them actual financial stability and freedom to go out and make those kind of moves. And they're a destination. They know they are. So there's a lot of reasons to do it early. Jarren Duran, there's a lot of names that have been floated around about being on the trade block here, Dan. This just gives them now more time, and they've let the world know. They've let the baseball world know that they are not sitting on their hands, that they are open for business, and that, every phone call is worthy at this point in time. That's the way I read it. It's good business. I've always remarked highly about teams that get the job done early. You know what I mean? Is there a bigger deal out there for Devers on July 30th? Yes, absolutely. But you know what? There's a win-win here for everybody, as we've kind of discussed for the last 15 minutes. And there may be a world where this is trade 1 of 3 for Boston, and by July 31st, they look really great.
For sure. Ownership. I mean, I just listen to Ken Rosenthal on a podcast convincingly say he believes that the Red Sox are not sellers, that they will be buyers up until the deadline. And that was before this deal. And I know he's not, I don't have a line to Ken Rosenthal, but I still assume that hasn't changed. Like, the Red Sox are not tearing this thing down. They just saw a really valuable deal for them. I mean, they're literally, if you think about it just this way, if 4 players turn into average major league players, they're gaining close to 20 years of cost-controlled players, like service time control.
The problem with that is, especially if you're close to the Boston organization, that's the last thing they want to hear.
They don't want, I know. And
they don't want to hear value or control. They want to see Dodgers like dollars. They want to see Dodgers like lineups. And I think what we're trying to say is that they have drafted and developed one. It's just going to take a minute to get there. And then they're going to look and smell and feel like one of those teams. And it's going to be in the American League, all the better, right? Because they're not going to be,
for sure,
backing up against this National League West and some of those teams out west that have been beating each other up. And I say this knowing full well that the American League East is about as red hot a division as we have right now. But I think the timing is what's going to throw most people off. It was kind of like a late Sunday news dump. It's on the heels of this Yankees sweep. There's just a lot of, Devers hit a home run for the Red Sox just before it happened. It's a saucy nugget, but we'll have to watch this one for sure. I'll put it this way, and this is fascinating because this is my 1 hour away takeaway. I am so much more positively aligned with Boston right now than I am with the Giants, and I love Devers as a hitter for the Giants for the next foreseeable future. I'm just concerned that he's going to bring some of that negativity to the whole situation, especially because. And correct me if I'm wrong, is he going to step in and have to play third, or is Casey Schmidt going to be the third baseman for the next month, Dan?
See, that's what I really don't know, and I do want to hold out on speculating on the Giants' plan with this a little bit, because it is such a unique situation with a lot of moving pieces that I they didn't just do this for no reason. So I'm sure they have a plan, but I do want to hear from their mouth what that plan might be.
Obviously they know. They've had all the discussions. The agents who we've had on this podcast before, has certainly been involved in all of the conversations we're having right now in terms of the positional stuff. But I would say this, and I have no stake in the game. If the plan in August, right? So after Matt Chapman is healthy, if the plan then is to DH Devers, I would DH Devers tomorrow. I would never let Devers step foot on the field, because the second you put him on the field and then take him off the field, now it's a story.
Yeah.
Right.
And
now now it's the Giants story. Right now, you're just taking on Boston's story and making the best of it. Right. Or maybe even improving it. But the second you make him a temporary third baseman, now this whole he's not playing defense for you either becomes the Giants' problem. And I think they can just keep away from that. Just make him your DH and make him do his thing. Right.
For sure. And I based on what he said in Boston, if he hasn't been taking reps at third, I'd be a little shocked if he's going to hop right back in there, right? I mean, he's been so vocal about that I'm a little bit, I'm a little bit curious to see how that all plays out. But I totally agree with you, and that is why I like this so much for Boston, is because when I look at their future, I'm super excited about the direction they're heading in. The one thing that I'm like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Was the Rafael Devers situation. If he caused that problem last offseason, how was the next decade going to go? I had some serious concerns. Now they clear the way for that. San Francisco gets what they want. Boston gets what they were sort of going for. I know it's removing a big offensive piece, but like I said, financial flexibility, et cetera, et cetera. Man, I like this a lot for both sides for the directions they're heading in. Now, I mean, I'm willing to be the guy on stage getting tomatoes thrown at him because I'm trying to speak this into talk Red Sox fans off the ledge of, this franchise player getting shipped out of town. But I mean, from a business and financial team building perspective, this is a good move for the future. It's a healthy move, in my opinion.
I'll give you one more, and it's one of those, objective questions that you absolutely loathe, but it's fascinating because this is going to be probably the move. I'd be hard pressed to think there's a move bigger than this coming in the next 6 weeks, but I hope to be surprised. And by the way, go and play with some of these big moves on our brand new Major League Baseball trade tracker, just launched on SpotTrack. Scott Allen has been putting his blood, guts, and soul into that sucker. So please go and trade future prospects and cash considerations and compensatory draft picks for all of your favorite players that you think are on the move in the next 6 weeks. That's all live on SpotTrack. But I'll put it this way. Trying to predict the future a little bit here, both with the trade deadline and the rest of the season. The Giants currently have 41 wins. The Boston Red Sox have 37 wins. They're both in the mix in their division, respectively. Who finishes with more wins in 2025, Dan?
Good question. Off the top of my head, I like the Giants quite a bit still. And adding this in the short term, I'm going to go that I'd take that side. But I mean, again, for 2025, I'm not over the moon for this move for either side. I just think in terms of the future, this is a great setup, but I'll go with the Giants for the sake of your question.
I'm going to agree with you. I think this is an absolute immediate shot in the arm for this Giants offense that if they can just add one or two more runs a game on an average basis, they can pitch. We know they've got starting pitching, and they can certainly bolster this bullpen a little bit more because, like I said, not really near the tax line, even after this Devers move. So they should be active with that bullpen and maybe a couple more, bench pieces as well. Both teams still in the mix is the takeaway. Both teams still in the mix. This is not a death sentence for either team by any measure. And the Giants are a major market that have done this kind of spending in the past, have been trying to spend like this 3 straight off seasons in a row. And they just had to go a different route to find a bat. That's it. Right? They free agency was not working for them by any regard. For whatever reason, there were plenty of stories out there as to why certain players chose other teams versus the San Francisco Giants, but they have Devers, and he seems happy based on the early reports, and he will be happy with McCovey Cove. He will be.
Yeah, I have not much to add. I mean, they have, if you want to look at Matt Chapman, Rafael Devers, Bryce Eldridge is the core I was just referencing for World Series contention. And Adames, yes, you have it. You essentially have your core right there. So I have no issue if that's their route that they wanted to take, and they're good. You know, if they're good with paying a DH $250 million, our motto, it's not our money, right? So
did you expect Boston to have to eat some of this salary with the second you heard the trade was happening?
I wanted to see, originally it was just Hicks. Yeah. What was it? Hicks and Harrison and TBD. So that I mean, the Hicks thing changes things, but I was thinking that they might have to hold a little bit of money, but once the other guys came out, I think it makes sense. The Giants gave up some valuable cost controlled pieces while still taking on that contract. So interesting all the way. There's a ton of layers to this one. I love two trades in essentially, and both of them have a lot of intrigue for just the timing that you referenced earlier, that we're seeing trades go down mid-June here.
2 of about 40 still to come, Dan. Good stuff. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
All right, and finally, I flipped the switch over to the NBA because baseball wasn't the only sport to have a massive trade happen on Father's Day. The Memphis Grizzlies sent Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic. I should say the Orlando Magic acquired Desmond Bane from Memphis for, if you haven't heard this, hold your breath, KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's got 2 years, 43 and change remaining. Cole Anthony, 2 years, 26 million remaining. And 4 first-round picks. That's the big sauce on this. That's the big juice. And if you listen to Keith Smith and myself anytime over the past couple of weeks here, and my peaked interest in just how aggressive Orlando was going to be with this young core that felt like they needed a shot in the arm to take that next level and get up that ladder rung, this appears to be it. And look, we've talked about small market teams. We've talked about the competition, right? When you put a name like Desmond Bane in the trade block, the Lakers are listening. The Miami Heat are listening. All the big boys are in. And for Orlando to win that battle, they had to blow the roof off the door. And they did. And that's what 4 first-round picks is. And it's insane. But I can tell you right now, I've done a little bit of reading on this. I have to do plenty more. We'll certainly have Keith on at some point here soon to break this down and plenty more moves that are certainly coming. I feel like the Kevin Durant move is hours away, if not a couple of days. So we will certainly have Keith on later this week. But in the small amount of reading I've been able to do, I saw the only sentence I needed to see, which was simply this. The Orlando Magic already have their young core. At least they believe it, right? It hasn't delivered the results, but from an age perspective, Paolo Banchero, the Wagners, etc., are low 20s in terms of age, developing, gaining experience, gaining playoff experience, a bit, bits and pieces, enough. So those 4 first-round picks, while valuable, probably didn't have a place anywhere near the starting lineup of the Orlando Magic for the foreseeable future. So their development was going to be thwarted. So why not turn those into players that can better complement this young core, amplify, increase, make you more successful? It was the right time to do this. We've seen OKC sit on their picks and then carefully and with calculation start to pluck some veterans using those picks. And I was hoping Orlando felt like they were in that moment, because I do believe, even with Banchero injured for a big stage of the season, when they kind of held court a little bit, that to me was a defining moment that, hey, this isn't just a couple of guys playing really well on a halfway decent team. There appears to be a systematic success strategy in place, something that they can build on, something that's lasting, foundation. That's what 2024-25 was for me for Orlando, which to me is the only signal you need to be aggressive financially and from a trade perspective. And this is certainly step one for the Orlando Magic in that regard. Is Desmond Bane going to walk in the door and make them a contender? Absolutely not. But he has made them immediately better from a starting 5 perspective, because he is the younger, more long-term version of what they were hoping KCP would be, and certainly more talented offensively. KCP joining Memphis makes sense. It's a little bit of a stopgap to fill that role that was just vacated. Certainly a cheaper option, financially speaking. And from Memphis's perspective, you kind of knew that some sort of shakeup blow-up was happening here. Certainly with the removal of Taylor Jenkins right before the playoffs, the John Morant stuff was on and off, injuries and stuff like that. We knew there wasn't going to be Ja that moved. Keith didn't think Jaren Jackson was the name that was going to be moved. So you start to go down the list a little bit, and this becomes probably a really tough player to move on from. But from a value standpoint, if the switch is truly being flipped in Memphis with this new organization and the new coaching staff, then 4 first-round picks is a really nice way to hang the hat on that. And that's exactly what they're going to have here. By the way, Cole Anthony, not a nothing point guard, right? On a 2 for 26, that's cost-effective. That's team-friendly. If you can turn him into a complementary piece to John Morant, or, and it's not for nothing, if he's a flip piece, if KCP's a flip piece over the course of the next 3 months, right? Because we're just limping towards this July 1st deadline to get the ball rolling. And we are, 50 trades away from the finish line in the NBA offseason. So Memphis strikes early. Orlando strikes early, maybe even more impressively. And you can see the yin and the yang for both sides here, specifically with the Magic, who are taking step one in aggressively trying to climb into legitimate Eastern Conference contendership. It's not enough, but it is a big, big step in the right direction. And by doing it now, by announcing it today, 2 weeks prior to that July 1st offseason, you've now given yourself a little bit more ammo and a lot more clout. Now, there's some players that won't want to play with Desmond Bane. I get it. There are a lot of players that will. And there are a lot of players that will understand exactly what's being built here in this Orlando Magic system and will want to be on board with that, whether that's through an exception or whether that's through some sort of agreement that can happen in the free agency. From a cap perspective, Orlando just got pretty expensive. Keith breaks this down in a piece on SpyTrade.com. And from a Memphis standpoint, they actually have a path towards cap space now, believe it or not, almost $5 million that they can free up in the black, something only Brooklyn can say right now. So you can understand that this was a little bit of everything. Certainly the first four first-round picks were the big win here, but getting a little bit more short-term to think about the long-term, and we'll see what that happens. What does this mean for John Morant, for Jaren Jackson Jr., who are, in terms of Ja, still under contract for a couple of seasons, and in terms of Jackson, just getting into his big-time extension, which can be amplified over the next couple of months here. So we'll see where the direction actually heads for Memphis, but some sort of major change was coming, and this appears to be at least the tip of the iceberg for what's coming for the Memphis Grizzlies going forward. All right, plenty more of that on SpyTrade.com. I mentioned the Major League Baseball trade tracker. Go play, have fun, share your thoughts, share your feedback. We want to make this as good as possible. And baseball's trade deadline appears to be here with the official start on June 15th. The blockbuster move that sends Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants. My thanks to Dan Soemann. Visit BettorEdge.com. Use code SpotTrack. Get yourself $20 at registration. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.